Yeah, gotta aim for the top like, hold up. Yeah, I can never doubt myself, I know better. All of you critics be acting like you know better. Blowing the smoke, but I know when the dust settles that I'm in my element. It's evident that there's levels to the game.
What's happening, people? Welcome back to the Athletes to Athletes podcast. And Justin is joining us once again. We said last week that he would be back and forth on some episodes pertaining on how his schedule looks. And this week looks like it's going to work out. So it is the trio of brains, or I guess I should 2.5 brains we'll go with. I'll be the half brain on that. That are going to be digging into some topics today. One of which is the topic at hand, Arch Manning. And we said before we came on here, like, we are very connected to NIL and things happening in sports. So you can kind of see this coming with some of the high profile guys. And the news that came out is Arch Manning is going to be in the new NCAA football game after opting out. And him and his uncle Eli did a promo for EA Sports to promote the game. And then obviously a day later, it comes out that he was paid between $50,000 to $60,000 to do that. So he opts in and gets paid handsomely for it, as opposed to getting the normal, I guess I should say, $600 and a video game, like everyone else that is in the game. So, like I said, for us, we saw this coming, but the topic really is about how this is going to change things moving forward. And why didn't any other agent or representation of these athletes think about doing this? When he opted out, you could kind of see it, where it was one of those things that he was going to be in the game, and the kind of the, I guess, bogus excuse of not wanting to be distracted by the game, you could see also was just, like I said, bogus. It was a ploy to be paid rightfully for his name, image, and likeness. So that's what is happening. But I want to get your guys' take on how transparent it was that this was going to be the outcome. And what do you guys think is going to change moving forward now that the NCAA football game is back and these players can be paid? What do you think changes for the years to come with these players opting into the game and being part of it?
Well, I think it's a unique situation because he's a backup.
For
And
now.
so for now, right, to start the season, like, well, and Quinn Ewers is on the cover, right? And so I think it's a unique situation they were able to take advantage of because he's such a high profile athlete. But we also I don't think any of the companies really like saw this coming. EA's probably been in the works this for a while because of the status of even when the game was in its heyday, we never had more than one cover athlete. We broke that this year. We've
Mm-hmm.
never had more than one athlete from the same school featured, right? And now we're in this ballpark. So I think it's a little bit unprecedented from a expectation standpoint, but from a seeing this coming, we knew something was going to happen. Like, there's no way he's not going to be in the game. He cares too much about his image and people playing as him in the game and all that jazz. But I think EA did a masterful job of positioning it in a place where it did seem a little bit out of left field from a marketing standpoint. But once you saw it, you were like, that's real. That's really good. People got paid a lot of money for that, both internally and externally, to make that happen.
Well, and I mean, even the piggy bit to, I guess, combat that a little bit, Justin, on the side, I think that Arch has a very experienced team around him, right? He comes from a family
Correct.
that has, let's say, some connections on some of those
Yeah.
things and whatnot. So to your point, I mean, backup or no backup, the name alone is what gets him attention. And we've talked about that forever, right? I mean, Livy Dunn
Mm-hmm.
wasn't on the starting rotation for LSU gymnastics, but she propelled that program to complete dominance from a PR perspective. And we see those examples kind of all up and down college sports. So I think him having such an experienced team around him, I'm sure played into this a lot. But, I would be really curious to see what like the EA sales and marketing team and the EA law team are talking
Yeah.
about right now. I feel like sales and marketing sees it as like an absolute slam dunk. Like we got Arch Manning in there. Obviously Texas always knows how to brand, we'll put it that way.
Hmm.
God love the alma mater. They're corporate as hell. Um, but at the same time, what does this mean now for the next year, right? How many kids that are in a similar position or at a similar pedigree from an influence standpoint look at this and go, man, did I just miss out on 50K to go and do this? And what conversation does that turn into for college football 26, right? Now, I am of the personal feeling that the sales for this particular game are going to absolutely explode, if nothing else, for the people that are between the ages of, let's say, 25 and 45, because those are the people that have missed out on NCAA for the last
Oh, I
years
pre-ordered.
at this point.
Yeah,
So
there's
did I.
kids that have never played an NCAA football game because it didn't
Hmm.
exist in their lifetime.
I've
Yeah,
been
I mean,
playing 14 for years.
we're gonna, oh yeah, I mean, people are having like closing ceremonies for that game. I mean, it's unbelievable. I think our generation's probably going to carry the sales initially for this whole thing, and they'll probably come out just fine for the amount of clamor that's been going around. But I do, long term, it is going to be interesting to see how they essentially restructure those conversations, because I think it's coming. It's impossible not to be coming, and maybe they have to have tiered offers based on the pedigree or the ranking of certain athletes. Maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe it has something to do with how many teams are played and what the impact is on them going, which, to be honest, will be great for a lot of those, I'll say lower tier teams, because you're not going to catch me playing as Texas or, Oklahoma or any team like that. I'm going, God love them. I'm doing like Marshall or Western Kentucky. I'm finding somebody down there to go and play as, and maybe find that a new favorite team or a new favorite running back. But yeah, I'm really interested to see what this does for college football 26, 27, and beyond, and how
Hmm.
they're going to manage that up and coming demand for players who believe they have that market value.
I the first question that came to mind was, okay, well, the starting quarterback was on the cover. What did
Hmm.
the cover athletes make? Right. And that never really comes out, whether it's a Madden football game or EA Sports college NCAA game. I've never seen, oh, so and so was paid this amount of money to, don the cover of Madden 2025,
Right.
right? Um, but with the Madden curse, that they've had to pay those guys. That there has to be some sort of greasing of the palm in order to get those guys onto the cover, no matter how much they have grown up saying, man, I can't wait to be on the cover of Madden, or at one point wanting to be on the cover of the NCAA game. So my thought is, they have three guys that were on the cover this year. What were they paid? Because those guys are all starters and
Hmm.
have huge personas in their own right. So if Arch Manning is getting himself and Uncle Eli Manning, paid for this promo for, and he's making 50 to 60, and Eli Manning is a Super Bowl winning NFL quarterback that has, the annals of history behind him. What's he getting paid for that? But I think ultimately, and it goes back to something that I said last week or 2 weeks ago when Reed and I were speaking, is there's probably going to be some sort of collective bargaining that happens with these mass deals where it's a rev share with an ESPN or a rev share with an NBC or CBS for the TV rights. And then EA Sports, which they tried to do some sort of collective bargaining to say, okay, you will get $600 and a free video game this year
Hmm.
to be in the game. And a bunch of people signed on to do it. But Arch Manning and his team were thinking, well, wait a second. If I'm allowed to get paid for my name, image, and likeness, why am I not getting paid accordingly when I already have NIL deals over here that are
Hmm.
paying me accordingly for my name, image, and likeness? Why should this be approached any differently? Right. So that's why I think he opts out of it. But like I said, I want to know if he's making 50 to 60 to do this promo and enter the game as a backup quarterback, what did Travis Hunter get to be on the cover? What did, Quinn Ewers get to be on the cover? Because he is the starting quarterback at UT.
Mm-hmm.
He is the face, as much as Arch Manning is a face of Texas. He's not the face right now. Quinn Ewers is still the face until further notice. But I think it also kind of solidified that having the connections that one would have leaving high school and going into the college ranks, and this is my segue into our next topic, is it's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
It is it to quantify any of these connections that a high school athlete has on that next level. And now they can have representatives at an even younger age that is telling them what their market value is and what they can get. And they're already entering those contract negotiations with NIL. The school you go to or the connections you have at a young age are absolutely paramount at this point. And like I said, this takes us into our next topic of how these how the younger generation, and obviously it was a big deal when we were athletes. I'm older than you guys, but I can still remember the private schools having the number of big time athletes, but now it's becoming more and more of a thing where this next generation of cover athletes and stars are going to a certain school and certain amounts of schools for different connections, right? And it's the new academy generation where specialized training is of the essence. And you're seeing more of these high level athletes being recruited to go to certain places to make it to certain levels. For me growing up, and like I said, I was part of the wrestling generation of Blair Academy being and still being to this day one of the top programs in the land, if not the top program in the land, where they were putting future NCAA champions on a number of Division I teams. But now you're seeing it even more in football. You're seeing it even more in volleyball. You're seeing it more in baseball. So what are your guys' thoughts? And Rita, I honestly want to hear your take because you work with a lot. You work with all of our students. What are you seeing on the student athlete, and I say that in quotes, or the athlete student venture, where it's becoming more specialized and centralized for these athletes to go to certain places so that they can gain certain connections and do what they want to do on the next level?
Yeah, I think that whole world to me has exploded in the last few years. I mean, IMG on a broad sports spectrum, I think we could say was sort of the architect of that model, right? To say, hey, come here, focus on the sports, at least in the American school system, focus on the sports, we're going to get you where you want to go. And I think they sort of saw parents, families saw sort of the flair, the pizzazz of that. Obviously, success from different players that went through, and it just exploded, right? The more that we've sort of bought in on this sports mentality as a society, and especially on the youth side of things, um, it's almost like a little mini college without a lot of the regulation is kind of what it comes down to, right? And the way these models work, you look at IMG, you look at what is it, Aquinas down in Florida, like that's another one. St.
Yeah,
Aquinas, is that
Aquinas,
what it
yeah,
is?
yeah,
Aquinas, yeah,
Aquinas,
Aquinas.
yeah, I don't, yeah, I'm saying it like a country person. The Baylor School out in Chattanooga, there's all kinds of post grad and boarding schools in the Northeast. You know, it's kind of almost become sort of this like if you build it, they will pay mentality. And I think a lot of it, similar to a college structure, you have these handful of kids that are sort of handpicked, if you will, to go to these universities because they do have that potential and they have that pedigree to them that is going to really propel the reputation of that boarding school or of that program into the national spotlight. And then you've got a bunch of kids below that are willing to, not below, but a bunch of kids that are on that team or in that organization that are willing to pay the $15,000 a year, the $85,000 to $95,000 a year at IMG, the $30,000 to $60,000 per year at Baylor School to fund these dreams and to fund these perceptions and to be a part of that club, for lack of a better term. And so, for me, I see a lot of that, and I see kids get reached out to all the time. Hey, you want to come to IMG and be an athlete? Well, I think a lot of people assume that is, hey, do you want to come to IMG and guarantee a scholarship, or come to IMG and guarantee a spot on a particular team? And that couldn't be further from the truth for any school. I mean, just like we tell our kids, right? We can't guarantee scholarships. We can't guarantee roster spots. We can't guarantee acceptances. 99% of programs out there are in the exact same boat. And yes, there are sort of these handpicked kids that go to these programs, but they were going to go where they were going to go regardless of where they went to school. Those folks had been found, they had been chosen, they had been picked. And really, in my opinion, these schools are just using the pedigree of those athletes to raise their own sort of influence and get these other kids to buy in and to help fund the next generation and the next class of kids that are there. That isn't to say that you can't get a great education at those schools. That isn't to say that, and to be honest, the network that you build while you're there and the people that you're surrounded by, that's really, I think, more what you're quote unquote buying into, right? You're buying into those establishments in the same way that people want to go to Princeton and Harvard and Yale. Yeah, you're going to get a quality education, but really it's to have access to that network and to be able to put that on the resume and have people have a preconceived notion about who you are and what quality you are. And so to me, that's a lot of what I see when I look at those things. I think it's, for the vast majority of them, the rich stay rich and they put themselves in positions to be around. And then you've got a handful of athletes that really come in, from wherever they are, they get a little bit of funding help, or maybe they don't. And they're the ones that sort of carry the reputation for these schools beyond that. And it just becomes a self-fulfilling cycle in that way. So that's what I see on my end. Maybe that's a little bit cynical. Not to say you can't have great experiences there, but it feels as though everyone kind of saw what IMG did, or they saw, what that wrestling academy did that you talked about, and went, oh, well, we can do that. We can make a nice gym, and we can put together private flexible instruction, and we can charge $30,000 a year. And if we get just one or two kids to come through and really have some success, we can turn that into the next class of kids. And maybe those kids will help us get the next class of kids. And it sort of grew from there for a lot of different places. So that I'll step off my soapbox now and let somebody else contribute. But that's my initial feelings on some of those different places.
Justin?
I mean, it's not just schools, it's organizations too, right? Like you have your sports academies, or you're the St. James, or you're the Athletic Republics of the world, or there's just a lot of institutions that are organizations that do really good stuff, but they've definitely leaned into we do like professional athlete work, right? And we're using that to develop our youth programs, right? Sports Academy is a perfect example of that. Like it was the Mamba Academy. They built out these structures. They rebranded Sports Academy for the youth leagues, and now like you see the videos of the U.S. Olympic roster or athletes that are in that caliber being there, plus the youth program. So we're using this star talent to bring in youth and bring in individuals for membership fees, right? And so when you look at that structure, you're looking at paying to sort of push off on REID'S soapbox, right? You're paying for your institution tuition or annual compensation that goes to those places, and then you look at facilities for training, organizational stuff that are built for sports specific, or they're built for off season, or they're built for these programs, and you innately end up paying another 50% on top of that for whatever training you're specifically doing. So we've built this sort of model where like if you're not in, it's like FOMO, right? Like, and it's not just the students who have it, it's the parents and the circle around. So you end up having this position where like if you're not doing it, you're behind. Where in reality, every student athlete is different, everybody's journey is different. You playing 2 sports, 3 sports may be a better avenue for you based on what you're trying to accomplish in life, whether that be athletically or not, versus saying, hey, my coach said I have to train this much this off season with these people, and if I don't do that, I'm going to get benched, right? And putting that it's almost fear. It's not, but it's very much close to like, if I don't do this, I will fall short of the expectation, when that expectation costs money, time, and effort, a lot of times out of the uh, disillusion that it's required for success. So I think that's another part of this avenue of when we talk about like high level high schools, is like there's other components that are required to even get there, let alone, keep your position or keep a stability, or keep in a position where you feel like you're going to find success.
Yeah. And you're not, you know, it's not to say that anyone can just go to these schools, right? You're being
Mm-hmm.
recruited, you're being taken out of the school that you're in and moved over to it. Um, I had a chance to go to IMG Academies for an event back in, was that 2009, 2010? So a very long time ago. But it was a different world when I was there. And it was nothing that I had ever seen. I didn't even know that IMG Academies existed back then. I didn't know that there were, I mean, obviously I grew up around, you know, high athletic schools, and I've seen
Mm-hmm.
these highly achieving athletic academies, but I didn't know that IMG in and of itself even existed. Right. And being there and being on that campus at that time, they didn't even have football at that point. And they were looking at developing it with their football coach Chris Winkie, who went to
Mm-hmm.
Florida State. And but at that point they were talking about, developing football fields and everything else. I was there for a 7-on-7 high school national tournament where some of the best athletes, some of which made it to the Division 1 level. I don't know if any of them made it to the professional level, but some of which went on to play Division 1 football. But there were Division 1 coaches there watching this 7-on-7 tournament. But the IMG campus, it's a different world. And what
Mm-hmm.
I mean by that is you have kids, and I mean literal kids that are 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, that are out on the golf course chipping golf balls at 7 o'clock in the morning, at 10 o'clock in the morning. And this
Mm-hmm.
was then. I don't know about now, right? So I can't really speak to what it is now. But when I was there were young, very young kids that were up very early. They had already had breakfast and they were getting ready to go out for their first session. There were your tennis, your wannabe tennis pros that were,
Yep.
hey, I got to be on the clay court today at 10, and then I'm switching over to, to this court. I'm switching over to this, like, and it's a regimented, nothing but athlete driven school. And like I said, at that point, I didn't really know that schools like that existed where you could get that type of specialized training. I always thought that specialized training came with a one-on-one trainer, or, you become a part of these kind of these camps or whatever else. Um, but seeing it where it's more in an academic setting and it's sponsored by Under Armour, and and it has the all the bells and whistles, and it's a gorgeous weight room, and they've got every single type of tennis court, and they've got specific parts of a golf course for you to just chip out of the rough or putt or drive. And then they're putting in football fields, and then you hear that it's a place where the professional athletes are going in the off season to train, and you see the professional athlete golf cart garage where they're decked out in the symbols of their respective teams. It was just very different, but now it's the norm where you're seeing this all over the place. And in preparation for this, I googled just general athlete development model, and the first things that came up, some of them were USA lacrosse, USA archery, Special Olympics, and then the one that really kind of stuck out to me was youth sports trainer. And the reason that it was because that was the only one that was specifically for youth training. These others, are the governing bodies, USA Archery, USA Lacrosse, where they are developmental governing bodies, and they have all types of developmental training. But youth sports training stuck out to me because it was the only one that was centralized for youth, and it wasn't a governing body, but it was on the first page of Google. It was one of the first top 10 or whatever that they give you. And that stuck out because I'm like, all I put in there was athlete development model, and I'm getting things for youth athletes, which at this point is kind of crazy because when you think athlete development model, you think our professional athletes, you think our top tier athletes that are now preparing for Paris. But youth is, to me, I'm thinking middle school and below. I'm not thinking high school, right? I'm thinking a lot younger than them. So the fact that we now have these youth sports academies, and there's a number of them that are here in Texas where we are, but the fact that you have a number of them even popping up where it is centralized for young kids that can't even drive yet is incredible. And it just speaks to how these models have started to transcend over to what they are now of centralized training at all levels, and kind of, in my mind, robbing a kid from growing up and just being an athlete and having a normal life. Having a normal life is kind of overrated in the sense of being, becoming an elite athlete. But when you're being robbed of the chance to, go to a high school prom because you have something else, or that you just can't be a normal kid, and it's not your doing, right? It's not you asking, I want to go here because I want to win a Super Bowl someday. You're 10 years old and you're already at these youth academies. You know what I mean? You're a high school kid and you're being pushed into doing certain things. So that was the thing that really kind of stuck out to me, was just how centralized it's becoming at such a young age, where, for me, I'm thinking these are your 16 through 18, maybe your 15 through 18-year-old kids that are going to be getting this specialized training. And then on top of that, it's your college kids, but it's becoming even more centralized in the youth sports for kids that want to succeed.
Well, Reed and I were at the Aspen Institute, I don't know, a couple months ago, and Reed, feel free to jump in here, but one of the numbers that was not surprising but still staggering was like participation in youth events is going down, but the cost of the cost of it is going up. So we're actually, to your credit, we're to your point you said, Ryan, is like we're making it more difficult for people without the resources to get into the programs you're describing, because they're becoming more required or prerequisites for continued success and or fulfillment for youth sports, right? If you're not getting playing time, and we necessarily equate success with playing time, like, one, that's probably not a good place to be, but number two, playing time requires additional training, additional resources, additional investment from both kid and parent now. And so we're seeing, participation go down, but innately there's more cash being ingested into the youth sports by these families.
Yeah, they're getting priced out. It's horrible.
Yeah, I mean, this is a topic that I think for all of us has been equally fascinating and infuriating to watch and sort of grow and develop over time. And to sort of almost even to widen the lens a little bit more, I mean, this is a perfect example of, the American economic model, for lack of a better term. I mean, this is capitalism at its finest. We purposefully have not regulated, have not federally funded sports in general as a country. We're one of the few first world countries that don't do that. You look to our neighbors to the north in Canada, right? Canada has a dedicated Olympic sport and sport funding process where they have regulations, they have, selectivity processes, all these different things to try and, really become more competitive on the international stage, but overall just develop sport in their country. And we haven't needed to do that and haven't chosen to do that mostly because we keep winning at a lot of different places. We have
Yeah.
successful college sports. We win Olympic medals in the winter and summer games. And a lot of that, I would like to think, is due to the fact that we're a very diverse country and that we are a very high population country. And so naturally that's going to happen. And there are people who want to win, and we're a competitive enough country that we create opportunities for that development to happen. But the way that we've structured it, it's at the behest of those who have the money. And that's kind of how that works. And we're seeing that in perfect view in these types of situations at the youth sport level, right? We're seeing the kids that can pay go to these large boarding schools or go to these academies and get all the training that they want. And we're seeing those pocketbooks help fund the scholarships that we really want to use towards the kids that we're handpicking, that we identify in different places that can really sort of rise and create the pedigree and the influence and the name that we need to see at certain sports. We see it happen at high school. We see it happen at youth facilities and sport facilities. Now we're seeing it happen, obviously, in college. We just call it scholarships, right? So it's, that model has really been, it's existed at all levels, in the American system for a while now. But I think that as all of this is becoming more contrasted and more stark, we're seeing that contrast more and more. We're seeing kids get, you know, either whether it be aged out from a competition level, because to your point, they don't have the opportunity to truly play. They have to either be on a private school, they have to be on a private team, or they have to, pay so many fees to be able to compete or whatever it might be. They're eliminated from competition in that sense, or they burn out quickly because again, we've raised this. You talk about that centralization. I call it specialization of sports so early to say this is who you're going to be. This is who you're going to identify as at the age of 8 years old. We're going to travel all around. We're going to care about the ranking of our 9U baseball team, and we're going to ride that into the sunset, and that's going to be our success. I mean, man, you talk about identity crisis, right? I don't care if it happens when you're 12, 13, 20. That's coming if that's what we keep doing for these kids. And I think that's a lot of the sort of slippery slope that you fall into with this stuff. So, to see our model and even like, we talk about the national governing bodies for these sports, right? And the Olympic Training Center, those are all privately funded, right? We don't as a country sort of support those and build those. And so you're at the behest of people that want to put money into these things and want to invest in these things. And as with all walks of life, if somebody has a hold of the pocketbook and somebody has a hold of the funding source, there's going to be some influence on who does and who doesn't, and insert whatever it is here after that. And so I think we see that at a lot of different levels. We see it at school, we see it at Olympic model, we see it in facilities. And it's disheartening a lot of the time. You feel like you see a lot of kids that are put out of the opportunity to compete or the opportunity to grow in those spaces because those decisions have to be made so early on in that development process.
Yeah. To bring it kind of full circle, it's for me when I look at kids that are 8, 9, 10 years old and they're being told, you're good at football. We're going to go to a 10-year-old 7-on-7, the baby Gronk of all of it right now, right? Where he's already has a persona and he's already getting, flack from every person on Twitter. And now hell, we're talking about him right now. But I feel like that's the trickle down of NIL, where everyone thought that NIL was going to be a complete disaster for the NCAA. And while it does have its trials and tribulations, and we've seen it rear its ugly head, we also just, like I said, talked about Arch Manning getting paid $50,000 to $60,000 to do one promo for EA Sports. But you're also seeing it in these dads or these parents who are living vicariously through their kids. And now their kids are told who they are, as you said, Reid, at a very young age, and they're going to have to establish themselves. And now the parents and the kid is worried about NIL at the youngest form in their lives. where they have zero financial literacy and where they have zero say basically in any of their money. So it's going to the parents that are profiting essentially off of their kids because they're living vicariously through them. But for me, that's where the trickle down of NIL is having the biggest impact, is where everyone is looking to have their son or daughter go viral because of whatever they do, where they're trying to be the next OBJ or the next Gronk or the next Simone Biles. They want them to perform like these high level athletes who have been working their lives to become these high level athletes, and branding them the next so and so doesn't help anybody. And then that's where the burnout comes, because they're pushing them to no end to try to be a high level 11-year-old, and it's just insane, right? And it's antithetical to who these kids can truly be, and they're not allowing them to grow. They're ultimately stifling who they can be, and that's the issue. And like I said, I think as much as we think NIL is going to be this ugly beast on the secondary uh professional level, because we talked about it being no longer being amateur, I think it's really going to have the worst impact on the youth, where kids are saying, oh well, I want to make NIL money and I want to make sure that I'm set up for the rest of my life, and they want to do it literally right now as a 12-year-old, and their mom and dad is pushing for them to contribute essentially to the family already at 12 years old and trying to sign an NIL deal because you're on the best 12 and under baseball team. So it's just, I hate them. I love the model of getting training to be the best. As somebody that has is around high level athletes all the time, I love that model where kids are training to be the best and they're putting in their hard work and dedication, because we all know what sports truly brings to you and what the byproduct of that type of discipline brings to you. But it also shouldn't be at the expense of their youthfulness and their naivety of just growing up and being a kid.
I'll leave you with this. I thought of this, but I was talking with somebody this the other day. Most kids want to be good at sports.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be good. They want to enjoy it. They want to have fun success. There's a very minimal amount of kids who want to be great and have the capacity to be great. And parents often cannot discern that because they're 12, right? And the amount of work it takes to be great in anything is so much more than it is to be good. And when you put that pressure on kids that are not programmed to be great at sports, or they're not programmed to have the discipline or the drive, or they don't have the ability, when you put all of that on a kid, it increases that pressure. And to Reed's point, it pushes them to burnout, or pushes them in directions that maybe they wouldn't have chosen themselves, which innately is going to set them up for failure long term. So I think this notion that, like, to your point, Ryan, of like, the expectation is you got to be OBJ, or you got to be this, you got to have this brand, or you got to go viral here. That is a huge jump to and skipping a bunch of hard work and failure and learning from failure to be great that we just skipped. And in order for us to actually get there and be successful, we have to do all of that hard work and pain and we're just not doing it, which is innately what is causing a lot of what we talked about today.
Because everybody sees the fact that they can skip those steps now. Oh, I need one incredible catch to go viral on Twitter. Everybody sees the byproduct of thousands of likes and the attention of thousands of likes. And that's why all these steps are being skipped. And that's why a lot of the parents are trying to skip these steps as well. When
surface level.
It really is. And if you look at it's funny because there was a lot of backlash essentially for the U17 basketball team that's filled with sons of either current or former NBA players, right? It's the Barnes twins, it's Kyan Anthony, Carmelo's son, it's Bryce James, and everybody's like, oh yeah, money bought the team. And it's like, well, one thing you have to remember is even though they have NBA parents that can either give them the training that they need or buy them the trainer that they need, they also saw what it took to be great. So there's something to be
Correct.
said about that. They didn't skip steps. You can be as mad as you want about Bronny James being in the NBA right now, but the nepotism that we have, and this is probably a topic for another day, but the nepotism that we have in sports, it transcends Bronny James being drafted to the NBA. But we'll come back to that for a different episode. But what I'm saying is, even though we're seeing celebrity children get onto U17 basketball teams, doesn't mean that it is special treatment, because these guys, these young men have seen the work that it takes to be great. They're in that atmosphere. They know what it takes, and they try to duplicate that as much as possible. And when you have, for Bryce and Bronny, when your dad is literally the best player in the NBA and he's working out at home, he's going to pass that on to you, and you're going to see the work and you're going to see the result of that work, and you're going to want to go after and get it yourself. So, even though that team looks the way it does with former and current NBA players, sons, and, comprising the entire team, essentially, there's a reason for it. And it's not the specialized training. It's the examples that were set for them as they were coming up.
It's your environment. Your environment matters so much.
All the time.
One point I want to also expand on, and Justin, I love the point that you made about, there's only so many kids that truly, really want to be great and have sort of the mindset to do that. I would argue I was a kid that wanted to be good. I just happened to be 6'4" and left-handed, and that got me a little farther than maybe, the average high school experience. But I think too, what we fail to realize, and we've kind of talked around it for a while here with sort of all, the money and the investment and all these things, these families and these parents that live vicariously through this, I think you almost subconsciously have a social contract with your kid when you decide to do these things of, I need a return on my investment. I'm spending all this money at these schools. I'm spending all this money at these academies. They've told me that I'm going to be near greatness, next to greatness, soaked in by greatness, and that these are going to give me the opportunities that I, in quotes, my kid, need to have to be able to be successful. And when in reality, I mean, when you look at the actual statistics of like who gets school paid for, right? 1% of kids, high school kids, are going to get an actual full ride scholarship at the next level. That's just the math. Like, that just is what it is. And so many families think that, well, if I pay for this thing and I do this thing, that's going to put me in that 1%. And if it doesn't, now you have a 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old kid with the weight of family finances on their shoulders, whether the family says it out loud or not, that is this, we've dedicated our time to this, we've dedicated our life to this, we've dedicated our money to this. There needs to be something on the other side that pays off. And to put that type of pressure on a kid, that's going to make anybody burn out or make anybody have an uncomfortable or unhealthy relationship with their sport, which is why I think that too plays into, you have families that have extra money, or you have families that come from successful athletics families. They don't have that same pressure that walks in, right? You come in, you've seen these things modeled after you, but at the same time, man, if it doesn't work out, dinner's still happening, right? Mom and dad are not going to resent me for the next 10 years for spending all this money and not having something pay off for it. You're okay. It's amazing how much higher you can jump and you can fly when you know there's a safety net below you that's going to catch you and take care of you. And I think that builds into this model. And you see kids, you see families that will, they'll leave the sport partway through because there comes a crossing point. There comes an inflection point, if you will, where, hey, if we're going to spend this money and we're going to do this, this better be something that you're willing to dedicate and really push for, because we need this to pay off at a certain point. And what 12, 13-year-old kid is willing to have that conversation or look their parents in the eye and say, yep, I'm willing to have this be my life and my priority for the next 5 years. And I'm okay with, making sure this pays off. First off, nobody can make that promise. And second off, man, what a weight to wear as a preteen. God, puberty's hard enough. Like, we don't need to add in extra layers to this whole thing. And so, when you said that, it helped spark that memory. And we've always talked about that, is that, man, you can't deny that sort of family and financial dynamic that comes into play, and that we've sort of forced onto families because of this rise in cost and this lowering of participation and everything that comes with that. It's inevitable.
Yeah. And I can tell you from experience of having a name that gets spotlighted within sports does have adverse effects, where the spotlight sometimes does get too bright. It does have some sort of detriment on what you feel you can accomplish, because you're kind of damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. You made it to where you made it to because of who you are. Oh, you failed despite who you are, and you can never be good enough. Oh, of course he's supposed to be a good athlete. It's in his genes. Oh, well, he didn't have a good game, man. Like, we expected more from him. He's so-and-so's son. He's so-and-so's grandson. He's so-and-so's nephew, right? Like, those things, even though you do have the examples in front of you, trust me, they don't always pan out. So, like, for anyone saying that the U17 team or any of the NFL players' sons that we now have, I mean, Ed McCaffrey now has 2 sons in the NFL, and despite everything that he has done for them, of, the stories that we've heard of, Christian McCaffrey being taken out of school early, or not being allowed to wear jeans because they wore his legs down, and all the stuff that his dad, instilled in him. Yes, it worked out, but that could have also had an adverse effect of, man, this is a lot of pressure. I'm supposed to succeed now. I don't know if I can succeed, right? So as much as you can water a plant as much as you want, sometimes you just drown it, and that happens, right? So, I think that these NFL factories like Aquinas, who's got 36, I think is what we have on our notes, 36 NFL draft picks, that's produced the Bosas and, Elijah Moore, Josh Palmer, Asante Samuel Jr. Like, these guys being able to go to this school and do the things that they've done, it showcases a lot of development. And now these schools are known for doing these things. And we're going to continue to see more and more NFL players and more of these NFL players' sons and daughters going to these types of schools. But let's wrap up here, gentlemen. What are your final thoughts on this topic? Justin, I'll go to you first.
Environment matters. Takes a lot to be great, everybody. It's real hard, but yeah, that's it. I mean, that's the reality of anything in life, sports, non-sports. Like, 0 to 90% is the easy part. 90 to 95 is the hardest.
Reid?
Stop giving kids parent responsibilities.
Amen.
That is how we finish today's episode. So we appreciate you guys
clip
listening.
that, Reid. I'm going to clip that one thing and just play
we
it
probably
over
need to clip that and put that somewhere. Maybe we'll put it on a t-shirt or something. But that is it for today's episode. We appreciate you guys listening. We will be back again in 2 more weeks. So make sure you keep it locked right here for the Athletes podcast.